coming from Studio 3. My name is Dr. Amr MABROUK. Dua Muhammad is at the control. And today in the world of info, we are presenting the world of books. And today in the world of books, we have two very interesting books that deserve really to be read. The first book is Churchill's Flawed Decisions by Stephen Wynne. And the second book is another interesting one, which is called The Basic Laws of Human Stupidity by Carlo Cipallo. So, after the break, we'll start right away. So we are back with the world of info and the world of books, and today's first book is called Churchill's Flawed Decision. Well, who is Winston Churchill? Well, first of all, we have to speak about the writer, and the writer is Stephen Wynne. And Stephen Wynne is a very special man. He was a police officer, a British police officer, and he has served with the Essex Police as a constable for 30 years between 1983 and 2013. And he, after retiring from the force, started a very great hobby where he has written several books, historical books, and some of them contemporary books and real-time books. For example, he has written a book about his two sons in the war zone in Afghanistan, and the true story of a father's conflict, which was published in October 2010. After that, he went into writing books about history. For example, Towns and City in the Great War, The Surrender of Singapore, 3 Years of Hell, and Walter Tull, The Black Lieutenant, and in January 18, History of the Royal Hospital, Chelsea, The Warrior's Repose, which he wrote with his wife. They have also written other two books together. Stephen has also co-written 3 crime thrillers which were published between 2010 and 2012, which center around a fictional detective named Terry Danvers. However, he's writing in history. He's an amateur, but he's writing a very good researched work. And this book is really very interesting because it's talking about the Churchill's flawed decision. And he starts by saying that he believes that Winston Churchill was a great man and a great politician. And like all great politicians, he has done some mistakes. And he said probably he's the most famous and the most influential political figure in the history of Britain in the 20th century. All this is right, all this is true. But the flaws or the mistakes that were done by Churchill for a lot of researchers and writers and historians is really, or are really, unforgivable. So let's talk about how is that. But before we start talking about the flaws of Churchill, we have to give a talk about who is really Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill was born in 1874, in 24th of January. And he was born in a palace that's his ancestral home of Bellenheim Palace in Oxfordshire, to a very wealthy aristocratic family. His father was Lord Landorf Churchill and had been the Conservative MP for Woodstock since 1873. And his mother, Johnny Churchill, was American from an extremely wealthy family who had built their fortune in finance. So this is just to give an idea of how rich this was, the family. And his ancestors go back to the Duke of Marlborough. And therefore, he's an aristocratic gentleman, born to an aristocratic and a rich family. And at the time of his birth, of course, the United Kingdom was a real great empire. And still, it was going to gain more colonies through this early period of the life of Winston Churchill. He went to a special school. In the early primary school, he was not doing well. But later on, his father transferred him to another school where he had started to show some academic interests and became more interested in education. After that, he went to St. Harris, the military academy, where he graduated from there with the rank of a lieutenant in 1825. However, he's from the very start wanted to become a famous man. He wanted to become a politician and a strategist and a military man. His education and his understanding of education has made him look forward to a colorful career. And when he was graduated as a lieutenant, he could hardly find a real war going on. So he enlisted going to Cuba at the time of the revolution there and the liberation movement that was there. He stood by the side of the Spanish colonial forces then, and he was sent under the cover of being a journalist, while actually he was working for the British British intelligence, of course. And after that, he used to have a lot of talk about India, where he served there for India some time. And he was not a big fan of India. He would say it's the godless land of snobs and bores. And of course, this is really a very bad attitude. And then the second thing that he was being self-indicated, he also liked to write books. And he also went to India, where he served there and has written a book about India. And then he went to Egypt, and especially in Sudan, in the Mahdi revolt, where he met Kitchener, and he has written a book about Sudan as well. And then he went to the South Africa, where camouflaging himself as a journalist as well, he went to cover the Boer War, and at the same time he was a prisoner of war for some time, and he was able to be released. And through these 5 years, he kept himself busy between South Africa, Cuba, India, and Egypt and Sudan. And this ended up by going back to Britain in the year 1900, and he was able to become a member of the parliament, a post that he was able to reach through his connections and through his, of course, charm and great culture that he is used to having, and to convince people to elect him. So this was the beginning of Winston Churchill. And after the break, we'll start talk about the troubles or the flawed decisions of Churchill. So you're still listening to the World of Info, and today is the World of Books. And today we are talking about the first book, The Churchill's Flawed Decisions by Stephen Wynne. And of course, we have to talk about Churchill, how he was able to climb the ladder of authority. For some time, he was a member of the parliament, and he left a great impression. He originally was joining the Conservative Party, then he ended up by joining the Liberal Party. And for some times, he was responsible for as a Home Secretary. And he has found himself into trying to bring down the strike of the miners. And he was not a big fan of the workers, and he was able to do certain maneuvers that was able to break these strikes. So this is one of the flawed decisions of Churchill. And of course, the second part of the flawed decisions is how he tried as well in one of the famous accidents in when a group of thieves tried to rob a bank, and they failed, and they killed two police officers and went into a building that was placed under siege by the police. And Churchill, as the Home Secretary, was one of the people who was responsible for putting down these thieves and controlling the siege. And rumors have it is that he's under his auspice. These thieves were shot in cold blood and were prevented. And of course, especially after the house that they were taking siege in was put into fire. So definitely this is one of his flawed decisions. But let's come to the most important thing. Come World War I, and he is the Lord of Admiralty. And this is a very important. He is the civilian gentleman in control of the Navy. And he had big plans for the Navy. And one of his big ideas was to be able to shut down the Ottoman Empire by reaching the capital Istanbul through the Dardanelles Peninsula and making a sort of invasion of the Gallipoli area. And the choice was very poor choice. The fact that this was really not sure to have in dropping in the forces, and there was sort of hills and mountains, and there was a catastrophe because the Ottomans were there, the Ottoman army was there. They grouped under the General Mustafa Kemal, and it was bitter war that ended with the loss of lives of the ethnic, that is the Australians and the New Zealanders, and British forces. They have succumbed to this bitter war with the losses of almost 100,000 soldiers from all these countries, Australia, from the Allies, Australia, New Zealand, and British, and besides the workers who were also from the Egyptians and from the Indians. All these were killed in cold blood in Gallipoli because of the wrong choice of Churchill on doing this. And it is well known that this grave mistake was put under the microscope. It happened in 1915, and then the Allied forces had to withdraw its forces 8 months later under the cover of the night, so that the Ottomans don't feel that they have withdrawn after doing nothing of their aims and not getting into the shores of Gallipoli more than 5 or 6 kilometers. So this was put under extensive scrutiny and extensive analysis and extensive research, and there was a committee that found out that Churchill was wrong in his decision, and that the Navy and the expeditionary force didn't do their job well of reconnaissance and actively fighting. And Churchill was to blame. He lost his job, and he even returned to the ranks of the army, serving as a major after being in the French front. But of course not in the nearby to the war zone. But of course this has put him down for certain time until the war finished. Then the war after is finished, and he is now part of the liberal forces, liberal party. He became another important post, which is the minister or the secretary of the colonies. And this is a very critical period of the life of Churchill. So after the break, we'll talk about this as well. So come the year 1920, and here we find Churchill, the secretary of the colonies, responsible for the important Cairo meeting, the meeting that has put the Sykes-Picot agreement between the French and French and the British into for the Levant, including Palestine, Syria, and Iraq, and the peninsula, under its complete supervision of Churchill, who has fulfilled the dreams of Sykes and Picot to put Syria and Lebanon under the authority of the French, and to put Palestine for a Palestine mandate following the Balfour Promise, and of course the formation of Jordan and Iraq. And of course there we can see after this the huge uprising that happened in Iraq, where Churchill, through his post as the secretary of the colonies, has given the orders to use the Air Force extensively to bombard the revolutionary people and bombard civilians, and this was one of his flawed decisions. Another thing is that at the same time there was the revolution of the Irish Revolution and the starting of the independence war that ended with the independence and the establishment of the Republic of Ireland, and the continuation of the supervision of North Ireland, part of the United Kingdom. When we look at that period, we find that he was responsible for forming the militia called the Black and the Tans. And this militia, he used the forces that have been released from the British Army to build up this great militia force that entered in a lot of fights between the Irish, and a lot of civilians have perished and died because of this flawed decision of the use of this inhuman militia. However, once he knew that the things are getting out of control, he tried to navigate and charter the independence of Ireland and the founding of the Republic of Ireland. When we come back into the period in between the wars, we can find him trying to be an aide to Chamberlain, and he was the Lord of Admiralty in the last days of Chamberlain and after the war started in September 1939. We can see that he wanted that the British Navy gets involved in the war and to prevent the invasion of the Nazi forces to Norway. And he has sent an expeditionary force that unfortunately ended up with loss of some of the important destroyers and frigates of the British Navy, and unfortunately as well the German forces were able to occupy Norway with losses from the side of the Allies. So this proves another problem. And also the thinking of the very big ship Lancastria with a lot of almost 4,000 sailors and soldiers on top of it also remain as one of the important decisions that were flawed of Churchill. And after this, he didn't try to make any investigation in this particular subject so that this will not affect his career. Enter the war and the start of the war and the invasion of Belgium and France. Churchill had a bright star moment when he was able to evacuate the Allied forces, the British forces, and some of the liberal French and the Belgian allies to the British Isles from Dunkirk, and therefore he was able to save a lot. So this was a good moment in June 1940. But the decision making that he made, that he ordered the thinking of the French fleet so that it doesn't fall in the hands in Wahran, in the hands of the Germans, also remain as a big scar in the hearts of French people up till now. Then the start of the Battle of Britain, where the Germans have bombarded, the Nazis have bombarded Britain extensively. And it was known later on, after the war ended, that the Enigma instrument, which is responsible for the deciphering of the code of the German forces, was found and taken from one of the submarines that before and salvaged. And therefore the Brits knew beforehand, until the end of the war, all the plans of the Nazi Germany forces. And rumors have it is that they have heard and that they found through one of the dispatches that Coventry City is going to be bombarded in a blitz attack, and that Churchill refused to announce this and to give any precautions to the Coventry citizens, and therefore there was a slaughter of many or thousands of civilians in this dreadful night. However, it was proved that later on in the late 20th century, it was proved that the British didn't know about this blitz attack on Coventry, and therefore he is considered to be more or less innocent. So let's talk about the role of Churchill in the East, that is in Asia, and this will be after the break. So we're still listening to the World of Info and the World of Books, and we are talking about the interesting book, the Churchill's Flawed Decisions. And we go now to the East. because Singapore was under the siege and the attack of the Japanese in 1942. And Churchill said that this island should not fall in the hands of the Japanese. So he sent forces there to support the garrison and to support the Singaporeans, but the equipment there and the people there and the army there was not well trained. And unfortunately now, in spite of the fact that there were almost 90,000 of Allied forces are there in Singapore, and the Japanese who attacked were almost 35,000, yet it ended up by that these Allied forces have surrendered to the Japanese, and this was a very hard time for Churchill, and he also was able to negate the investigation, and no committee was made to discuss that, so that, as he said, the morals of the British will not be affected. So the most important catastrophe that was inflicted by Churchill in the East was not the fall of Singapore, but it was the Bengal famine. In 1943, there was drought, there was loss of grain, and in the almost 3 million Indians lost their lives, in spite of the fact that the storehouses of the British forces in the subcontinent, the Indian subcontinent, and in Europe and in Australia was full of grain. Churchill gave the orders not to supply this grain to the people in famine, and saying that this food should not be distributed there, because maybe the British forces or the Allied forces will need this food. And unfortunately, this ended with the loss of 3 million people, a very unforgivable deed of Winston Churchill. Another thing, in 1945, in spite of the fact that the war was ending, Churchill decided and agreed on bombing of cities. And he has given the order for the carpet bombing of Dresden, where almost 40,000 people lost their lives, civilians and others. And the only reason that he didn't go on bombing other cities is saying that when some of the strategic command said to him, if we bomb all these cities, there will be a lot of refugees in the roads, and these refugees will block the roads in front of the advanced Allied forces. So it was not for the sake of humanity, but it's the sake of practicality. So we go after the war. He lost the elections directly after the war, unexpectedly, but there was another resurrection of him in 1950, and he became a prime minister again. At that time, there was the Malayan emergency. In 1952, he has ordered to try to force the revolutionaries into submission, which later on ended by their independence, but of course he inflicted a lot of pain on them. And also the Mau Mau rising in Kenya also was one of the things that happened during his watch, in his last watch in the early 50s. So by this we come to the end of speaking about Winston Churchill. For a lot of people, he was the best politician, British politician in the 20th century. He was able to defeat and to negate ways of discussion with Roosevelt to supply and support the cause of the Allies. And of course, he was able to, in the end, to get the victory over the Nazi regimes and the Axis force. And also, it is well known that he has done a lot of effort as regards his oratorial capabilities and his way of writing, that he was given the Nobel Prize in Literature, not in peace, of course, but this gives you an idea of how he was a great writer with a great talent. So in the end, should we consider him an imperialist, racist, or just a politician? Well, I think he is the three of that. He was a great politician. He was an imperialist who was raised and lived under the auspice of the British Empire. He was definitely racist in a lot of statements that he has given through the years of his service in politics. A book that deserves to be read and a food for thought. Churchill's Flawed Decision by Stephen Wynne. So you're still listening to the World of Info and the World of Books. Stay tuned to us. We're coming back after the break. So you're still listening to the World of Info, and today is the World of Books. My name is Dr. Amr MABROuk. Dua Muhammad is still at the control. And yes, we have a very interesting book. A book that deserves to be read, and a very interesting history of the book. The book is called The Basic Laws of Human Stupidity. And the author is Carlo Cippello. This gentleman was a professor of economics, a very shrewd professor. He was from Italian origins. He lived in the United States. He was born in 1922 and he died in the year 2000. He has a great important role as an economist and a role model of economics. And he has written this beautiful book in 1976 as a short book that was intended to be given to his friends. He never shared this book with anyone, and he gave it to some of his friends, and his friends were very happy with it, and they tried to convince him to publish the book, but he didn't do that. However, in 1988, he accepted that this book should be published, but it was published in the beginning in Italian, and of course this was really interesting to be published in Italian, and it had a lot of admirers. And later on, he accepted that this book will be published for the British, for the English speakers, and of course this is very interesting. So let's talk about The Basic Laws of Human Stupidity by Carlo Cippello after the break. So we're back with this interesting book. How is it, The Basic Laws of Human Stupidity? Well, the first basic law is that you will never ever know what is the percentage of stupid people in any community. But it is definitely higher than your greatest expectations. This is the first law. The second basic law is that there is no discrimination in the distribution of stupidity. It has no relation to race, sex, origin, or education. This is marvelous. And the third law, or the third rule, is that what is the definition of stupidity or a stupid person? A stupid person who would try to cause you harm even though he would cause no benefit to himself, and even he can harm himself. This is very interesting because he's dividing the people into three categories. The helpless, or the people who are bystanders. Then sometimes comes a stupid man or a thief, inflict troubles on them. The second group are the intelligent people who can notice a lot of things and bad things around them, and they are always prepared. Then there is the bandit. The bandit is the thief. He knows exactly what he wants. He'll try to get what he wants, and he doesn't care to inflict on you harm or inflict on the others harms. He will take what he wants and steal it. The fourth person is the stupid, or the fourth group. The stupid might be your friends, might be your enemies, but in all particular moves that they do, they are harmful. You cannot befriend a stupid person. You should get away from having partnership with a stupid person. So stupidity and power, this is very important. How can stupid person reach power? Either genetic, being a member of a very important family, or he received his power status through being pushed to his new place of authority by other stupid people around him. This is very intelligent and very interesting. So the power of stupidity, you can never ever deny the role of the power of stupidity. Why? Because there is no limits. And that's why Einstein once said, there are two infinite things in the world: the universe and stupidity. And I am not that sure of the universe, but stupidity is infinite. What does this mean? This is the core of the book. He's saying that you'll never expect how a stupid person will act. If he is your partner, he will cause you unnecessary, unexpected, and unplanned harm. So you, as an intelligent person, cannot really compromise or you really understand or find any coherent way to understand how this trauma inflicted by the stupid person, unnecessary thing, is really mindless. So this is very important, and therefore you should not be sharing any work or personal secrets or whatever with a stupid person, because the trauma inflicted on you by this strange person or this stupid person is unlimited, is infinite. So that's why he would say that a bandit will be more better than a stupid person, because therefore in different countries you will find that the countries that have stupid people in their helm of power can really affect negatively the progress of the country itself. And therefore the book is really touching the core of stupidity and touching how it is important to identify the stupid person and be aware of him, and at the same time don't get yourself involved with him. Don't become a partner of him or her in your life, and know that there is no end for stupidity. So this is an interesting book. Just in 50 pages he's analyzing stupidity, and just in this very few moments he can tell you exactly what we should look at. So this was really an interesting book. So by this we come to the end of our program, The World of Info, and today was The World of Books. We have presented today two interesting books. The Churchill's Flawed Decisions by Stephen Wine, and the second book is The Basic Laws of Human Stupidity by Carlo Cipallo. My name is Dr. Amr MABROUK. Dua Muhammad was at the control. Please always stay to Radio Cairo, tuned to Radio Cairo, and we promise to come back the same time, same station next week. Have a lovely weekend.